Thanks for waiting. I'm so sorry I'm a little late, but yeah, today has been what you would call a day. So, all right, let's get this together. Let's get all this together because we are going to be talking about some fun stuff today. I just want to make sure that everything is working out, so let me just check this really quickly. I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to turn on. I am the only person I have. I'm the only engineer, I guess. The only engineer, I guess. The only engineer, I guess. The only yeah, that's echo. I'm so sorry. Okay, so today I will be talking about a little something called Komiks, and yeah, so it's Komiks, Katakutan, Kwentuhan, Katakutan. Because today I am celebrating Filipino American Heritage Month, which I'm assuming that you guys are as well. I am a very proud Filipina. I am an immigrant. I'm a Canadian immigrant. So that means I'm a Filipina immigrant from Canada. I'm an immigrant in Canada from the Philippines, is what I meant to say. So right now, I am working in Toronto, which, you know, it's going well. It's going pretty good. All right. Please let me know if there are any issues with the stream. Every now and then I might pause just to make sure things are going, because when you tab out of Hades, it kind of pauses. So just so you guys know. And we can begin. I'm going to be playing a game, and we will be chatting about whatever it is that comes to your mind. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your questions. I'm going to make sure I'm watching the stream on a separate place, I guess, separate account, just to make sure that things are going smoothly. So please excuse me for a second. Let me just make sure that everything's working. What do you call it? It's raining really hard over here in Toronto right now. So yeah, things are happening. Let's just say that things are happening, and hopefully this entire game will run smoothly. It looks like things are going well so far, so we'll make sure. Give me a second. I am doing double duty essentially, so. All right. Let me see. Let's see. So hopefully things aren't too loud. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. So I will be playing a game of Hades and answering some questions, making sure that you guys, you know, get a little bit of entertainment value out of this as well. Okay. So let me just make sure that things are running smoothly. Okay. All right. Give me a sec. Okay. So I don't stream as often as I'd like, but hopefully you'll still enjoy the stream. Give me a sec. Okay. All right. Okay. You will see a little bit of fine-tuning over here. Wow, that is loud, isn't it? Okay, let's see. Let's see if that's better. How does it sound? Wow, that sounds way better actually, now that I'm hearing it. Okay, so we shall get to playing, but if you have any questions, make sure to let me know. Today I'll basically just be chatting about different things that I really enjoy. One of which is, of course, comics. So you might not know this, but in the Philippines, comics are very popular, and basically, like, it wasn't like, so there was a big thing about comics back in the 80s, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I believe it was. They Comics were used as a means for a lot of people to learn different things. It was used for education as much as it was for entertainment. There were a lot of these amazing comic book artists and amazing comics that came out around that time. I remember even my mom, who was born in the 50s and 60s, like in the late 50s. My nana, she loved comics, and a lot of them were just, I guess they were adaptations of existing stories, like classics. And I remember growing up in the house, we had a classic like Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo comic, which is very cool. It's like a kind of a way for people to learn about different things, while also, getting entertained, with a lot of really dramatic, really shadowy, really cool um, art. And a lot of the artists actually are still very much active today. You can look them up for sure. I will be providing, by the way, at the end of the stream, I will be providing a link to some information, and probably like be posting information on my Twitter. So for those of you who don't know, my Twitter is at MotziD. So that's at MOTZ, I say Z now, IED. So that's where you can find me on Twitter. You can just search my name as well, Motzi Dapul. And I will be posting a bunch of the different resources that I've been mentioning during the stream. I will try to get them all, but hopefully it won't be too bad. All right, let's see. Hopefully, I think my mouse is very clickety clackety, but like, I'm doing my best here just to make sure that it's not gonna be too distracting. Let me make sure. Let me do you guys a favor and make sure that that it's not clicking too much. Although that is like a unfortunate side effect of gaming streams. So this stream was kind of, I guess, not necessarily out of the blue, but it has been a very busy couple weeks. So I really wanted to get into this before the end of Filipino American Heritage Month. I was wondering if I was still allowed to do this because I am Filipino Canadian rather than Filipino American. But I do feel as though that you guys might enjoy some of the stuff that I talk about. Let me see. I'm not sure. It's a very loud click, isn't it? Okay. Give me a moment. Oops. Let me make sure. Oh wow, that is just repeating that same sound. Okay. Okay, I got some stuff on. Let's see. How does this sound? Okay. You can still hear the clicks. Well, I guess you'll just have to live with the clicks. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay. Alright. Let me make sure that everything is going fine. Give me a sec. Hopefully the stream is going. One moment. I haven't even like started gaming yet, have I? Let me make sure that everything is going well. Let me make sure that everything is going well. Okay, so hopefully that sound isn't too bad. Well. Okay, so hopefully. All right. Let me just. All right. Now that we are basically doing like 20 minutes of troubleshooting, I would like to start the game, and I will talk about a little bit of everything as I go along. You guys are here for the comics. You guys are here for the horror and everything. make sure to ask any questions. Feel free to do that, and make sure just to, yeah, like, sound off in the chat. I will check every now and then just to make sure I am not missing anything. Alright, you are hearing me typing, and now you are hearing me just making sure everyone arrives. So those people who want to catch up on this, don't miss it. Every single sound is being picked up. I just want to make sure that this is fine. Okay. Oh my, alright. Did I say Heritage Month? I actually meant History Month. Similar ideas. They also start with letter H, so, you know. Yeah. Alright, okay. Just making sure everybody is gonna be here who wants to be here. And we will see. Alright. This is like the most boring beginning, but I promise I will highlight it. I will make a highlight, and I will make sure that things sound better. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Okay. So I want to ask, first of all, like, if you guys are listening, I would love to get the answer to this, whether it's now during the stream or on my socials. What is your favorite Filipino creature, monster, mythology, or story? And especially if it's a horror story, because it's Halloween, and you know, like, we gotta be Halloween themed today. You know? Happy Halloween, everybody. We don't really celebrate Halloween that much in the Philippines. That's the first thing you need to know. By this point in time, it is Christmas. So for those who love Halloween, I'm very sorry. Halloween is not a thing in the Philippines. However, we have amazing horror stories. So, you know, like, it's great, honestly. Like, we have a lot to celebrate. Even if we don't have Halloween, we kind of do. It's all Halloween all the time. It's scary. It's scary to live in the Philippines. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Yes, I did, but I mean something different as well. Something more fun in the long run, I think. Okay. Make sure this is all working out. Alright. I think that is about it. We can start the gaming proper. Actually, so I'm gonna reset, and if you guys want to vote on what weapon I want to use, you can for sure. Oh hey, it's Roxy. Hi Roxy. Woxy, yeah. Asian horror stories are so next level. Yes, that is very true. Sorry about that. Let me just fix the sound real quick. Brighten this up. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so I'm gonna be restarting this game real quick, and we will have a little bit of fun. Okay, so what's gonna happen here is that we can talk about. You can ask different questions. You can just, you know, you can talk. You can chat on the chat. You can chat. And I will be answering some questions about Filipino folklore, mythology, and of course, like, all other stuff. For those of you who don't know, I actually created, I produced, like, it was created by multiple amazing artists and artists and creatives called the Pinoy Monster Anthology. It is the first one was the Pinoy Monster Boyfriend Anthology, and then there was the Pinoy Monster Girlfriend Anthology, and then there was the Pinoy Monster Lover Anthology. So the reason I made that is because I had such a huge love and affinity for Filipino monsters, and I actually really wanted to do a romance angle for them, which I thought would be very fun. I thought that would just be cool. And let me just wait. Ooh, chat. Capgrass, hello. Come dance in the stream. It is a wonderful thing to do, and I'm very happy you're here. Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm watching the chat. Okay. If you have any questions, make sure to ask them. I am checking the stream every now and then. And what were they saying? Right, okay. So what I was saying was, Filipino monsters have always been like really interesting to me, and I think for a lot of people, the first exposure they had to Filipino monsters was this little thing called Trece, which is a very famous Filipino comic by Budget Tan and Kajabadissimo. If you have heard of it, it just came out with a Netflix series just this year. Everyone is very happy about that. It was the first ever Filipino animated Netflix series to go international. I mean Filipino series in general, but I believe it was the first one to go like as international as Netflix. I know there is like actually another Filipino animated series that came before it, and if you will believe it, it is an anime called Barangay 143, I believe it was called. So Barangay 143, Barangay is like a what do you call it? Like a district in the Philippines. It's like a village or a area. So barangay is what they're called. And it's based on an ancient Filipino word, balangay, which stands for a gigantic ship on which people live. Like they literally like, if you remember Moana and they're like gigantic seafaring ships where a lot of people could literally live for days on end. That was a barangay, and the idea of a barangay is kind of similar to that. Like smaller barangays are about that size, and yeah, like it is just such an interesting like aspect of Filipino culture. And so anyway, I like went on a tangent, then I went on another tangent. But what I was trying to say is another series that came before Trece was actually Barangay 143. I believe it was Barangay 143. I don't remember. It's a number. Okay. Let me just make a quick decision here, and then I will continue. Yeah. Okay. So, another thing that I wanted to talk about, the same thing I want to talk about, I was trying to say, is that we have a lot of really cool Filipino folklore. As you know, it's very like weird, and I think I have been able to put a little bit of it in Hainai, but honestly, like a lot of it is like very much like something I haven't covered yet, and I want to cover more of it for sure. I want to have a sort of like mainstream, how do I describe it? Like I want to bring a lot of the Filipino monsters to mainstream. And when I talk about the Filipino anthology, Filipino Monster Anthologies, I'm also like, I am in the queer community, and in the Philippines, there's a certain, like there is a very much conservative view of queerness. Like, when I was growing up, there was very little acceptance of queerness, and even now, like, there's no gay marriage in the Philippines. Like, we've wanted it for years, and like everyone's kind of agreed that it's a good idea, but like, politicians being politicians, they don't even like take care of basic like welfare, basic Filipino welfare. So it's like, why would they, do something even remotely progressive? If that sounds familiar, let me know. Because, that's a problem in a lot of places, I notice. So, it is what it is, but, we live with it. One of the things that I really love about, like, Filipino folklore and monsters and mythology is kind of the idea of, how to describe it? The idea of how monsters characterize trauma, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, I know that a lot of like Filipino monsters make sense in when you contextualize it to the culture. I mean, a lot of monsters do in general, right? Like, apart from the really Hollywood ones, even those have a little bit of a culture behind them. Monsters in general, like, they exist in a zeitgeist, I guess you would say. They exist, like, to characterize people's traumas, and
Oh, hello.
it is, like, it's very interesting how unique Filipino, but also just in general Southeast Asian monster stories are when you really think about it. Like, in Southeast Asia, we have so many different monsters and so many different creatures that are that are dismembered. There's the manananggal in the Philippines, which is a fan favorite and one of my favorites. She is usually a woman who detaches her upper body from her lower body and flies with, like, bat wings, like you can see on Meg right here. Hey, Meg. But yeah, she has 2 bat wings, and she flies around looking for small animals and fetuses to snack on, to eat. And I believe it had a lot to do with yeah, there's a lot of fetus anxiety in Filipino monsters, let's just say that. And in where was it Indonesia, Malaysia, there's another creature, I could look this up, I should probably look this up, called the penggalan. And the penggalan is similar, except it is a head with a spine that flies around. I believe it also, like, carries some of the organs along the spine. Which is also really cool when you really think about it. It's just so metal. It is so crazy. You can, like, look some of these creatures up, the manananggal and the penggalan. They are insane. But I'm not completely aware of different other Southeast Asian creatures, but I am very much aware of Filipino creatures. And that one, manananggal, and of course my absolute favorite, nobody is surprised by this, the tikbalang. So, the tikbalang, for those who don't know, no matter how many times I talk about it, tikbalang is it's kind of like a minotaur, like, you know, you would see in this game, except the tikbalang has a horse head, and it is a very weird creature because, like, the Philippines didn't really have, like, the type of horses you would see. We have horses, but the horses we have are really tiny. Like, they're sturdy. They're made for certain other tasks. They're made for, you know, they're kind of like almost like mules, but they are, like, basically mini horses to match mini people. And I actually, of course, I'd have to talk to a historian. Like, I would have to really chat with a historian who has more information about this than I do. But I do believe that horses weren't endemic to the Philippines in the earliest days, so the idea of a tikbalang might have been a newer addition by trade and colonization and other things. I do have to research this properly. For somebody who loves tikbalang, you're like, oh, why haven't you researched this? I know. I'm sorry. Okay, let me see. Ooh, okay. Okay, let me just look at the chat. The real monsters are the old rich men. Correct, as is always. And Capra says, yes, that's very cool, and I agree. Okay, so I should also, like, comment on. I am a fake fan. I'm so sorry, Cap. Oh gosh, dang. Can you imagine?
About old time.
Can you imagine me actually remembering real details? Okay, let's take a short break. Let's take a song break with Eurydice and Orpheus. And while I go get some water, so please, I'll be right back. Please excuse me. Second. Also, for those wondering, this is not the yeah, I mean you already know, but this is not the Hainai Halloween stream. Even though we're streaming on the Hainai server or the Hainai Twitch, it is actually, yeah, this is for Filipino American History Week. So I hope you guys are enjoying so far. I am chatting about Filipino horror, folklore creatures, and right now, yeah, I'm chatting about Tikbalang, my favorite creature. You don't see it here, but I do have a ton of Tikbalang art on the wall, so, you know, that's not surprising at all. Okay, sure. Please excuse me. If you are not aware, I am the only person who is technician. How do I describe that? Okay, give me a sec. Let me just make sure that everything is where it needs to be. Please excuse me for a sec. Thank you so much for your patience and understanding, and also for attending the stream. I hope you guys are all having fun so far. If you have any questions, make sure to, of course, open them up right here. Let's see. Alright. Okay. Just making sure everything's working. Okay. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that singing interlude, and now we will return to the game. Okay. So yeah, like, I would love to ask, what's your favorite monster or creature or anything like that? Because I am actually quite curious. Because, you know, like, there are a lot of, like, really interesting monsters, especially ones that are, like, from your area, from your hometown, and, like, from your country, from your hometown. I'm actually very curious about that, because there are a lot of, like, really cool, very specific monsters, weirdly specific monsters. Like, we all know about Mothman. We all know about, yeah, of course. Like, there are actually, like, a lot of monsters that I did research on here in Toronto, which I found really cool. There's actually one, I cannot pronounce it for the life of me, so, you know, like, if you know the pronunciation, you can let me know, but there's a creature, it starts with letter G, Gassen, yeah, I don't know, I didn't even try to pronounce it, ignore me, but, there's a creature that apparently is a gigantic serpent. It is an indigenous folklore creature, and it is a giant serpent that lives in Lake Toronto, yeah, in the lake that is the size of a ocean, a sea, honestly, here at Toronto, and it is said to just, yeah, it is their own, like, not even a Loch Ness monster, because honestly, like, the lake here is huge, like, it is an enormous lake. I thought it was the ocean. It's a lake. It's weird. But yeah, like, I just found out very recently when I moved here that lakes in North America are enormous. Why is my question. Lakes in the Philippines are tiny because we are surrounded by the ocean as islands. So it is very much, yeah, it is fascinating to me. So let me see. Ooh, alright. Fresno Nightcrawlers. Ooh. That is so interesting. Fresno Nightcrawlers. What is that about? Okay, give me a sec while you can stare at Dionysus' thighs while I look this up, because I am interested. Oh, what is this? Fresno Nightcrawler. Whoa! Oh, they're like Ghibli creatures, but pants. Oh, that's so good. Funny pant guys. Oh my god, that is amazing. I love the funny pant guys. Oh my god. Okay. Let me just make sure. I just want to make sure that the sound is good, y'alls. If you have any questions, any issues, let me know. This is also like great practice for tomorrow's stream. Or no, tomorrow, not tomorrow. Sunday stream is what I mean. Wait, no. Tomorrow evening. It's Sunday for the Philippines, is what I meant. Okay, let me see. Let me think. Okay. Anyway, if you heard that, that was my roommate's cat. Also my cat, I guess, our cat, who is a crazy little. She's fine. She's very chill. She's very sweet and chill, but she's also like, whenever my roommate goes out, which she is right now, like she's attending a little event. She always gets very clingy. This little cat, this little kitty cat. So she goes crazy. I literally had to. One of the reasons that I was a little delayed starting this stream was because she was very curious about my my computer setup here. So she was all over here. It was amazing. I was very sad to push her off, but I had to. I'm sorry. Her name is Lily, by the way. Okay, let's go.
Get me out of here.
Lily was being a very excited and happy cat, and unfortunately, in this household, that is not allowed. Okay.
Gods want me to choose.
It's not the purest act of love to aid someone.
Look at Aphrodite. I don't know if you guys like this game or have watched or played this before, but it is the easiest game for me to kind of play while I'm talking. Okay, so I have talked a little bit about creatures. I will say I did not do enough to kind of explain what's going on with the Pinoy Monster anthology, but it is basically like a queer anthology by mostly queer creators, all Filipino, and we have different, not necessarily romances, but a lot of them are romances between humans and Filipino creatures and other creatures from around the world, as long as they're made by Filipino creators. And we have a different theme for every single one. Sorry about that. You could see that coming from a mile away. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I was in the rain. I am so sorry. But yeah. There is a there is a lot of like there's actually quite a hunger or like a love for like different Filipino creatures, quite frankly, and a lot of like queer content, of course. Because in the Philippines there are a lot of queer people. Like it's not even like an unusual thing. We have had like queer people are so ubiquitous in the Philippines. Our most famous like show hosts, for example, like there is literally a gay language in the Philippines, and it is known by most people like in the middle class or even lower class. Like this is it is common parlance, as you if I could say that, because of the ubiquity and or like popularity of a person named Vice Ganda, and a lot of others. I can't name them all right now. Oh, I'm a bad fan. I didn't get to watch as many of it before I left the Philippines. But yeah, like there are a lot of really amazing icons, queer icons, which makes it all the more like frustrating to have such hostility against like queerness in as like, you know, as a matter of just how do I describe it? Like it is so frustrating to have queerness be something that the law doesn't protect. But to be fair, well, not to be fair, there's a lot of things Filipino law doesn't protect, so I can't even be surprised. You know what I mean? Okay, let me make sure. Sorry about this. Just make sure everything's running smoothly again. Give me a sec. Okay. Alright. But I'm getting a little bit off topic. Or am I? Like, I don't even know what topic I'm talking about right now. So, you know, I don't know what's happening. But I am very happy that you guys are here, for sure. Alright. So, I guess going from Filipino queerness to Filipino horror. So what does that have to do with anything? Like, what do those two topics have to do with each other? I'm glad nobody asked, but I think that it's such a fascinating like thing to me, like to see a lot of Filipinos having a lot of like love for folklore is a thing that I noticed in comics, for example. Comics with a K, like Filipino created comics and graphic novels and webcomics and things like that. There has been like a huge love of like mythology, and it didn't even start with Trece. Like I think that's the most like known now, especially with the show, but it is absolutely not the first. It is absolutely not the most iconic. And I actually want to shout out like this creator. His name is Arnold Are, and he is a creator of something called the Anthology class, which is a 90s comic about this class of college students. Yeah, college students who end up like in the middle of this. Okay, so in the mythology class, there are a bunch of Filipino creatures attacking people, and they find out that they were escaping from these jars, and the jars were being kept and managed by a bunch of time-traveling heroes from the past, in the future, from various places, if I remember correctly. And they end up in modern-day Manila, or Quezon City, in fact, where I grew up, by the way. And they end up this bunch of different college students help this old lady and her team of time traveling heroes to stop these creatures. And a lot of the creatures are those very famous Filipino creatures. There's a Chanak, which is a monster baby, is the easiest way I can describe it, but more horrifyingly, a Chanak has a lot to do with basically like it pretends to be a baby to win your pity, to get you to come to it, and then it does a terrible thing. It eats you, or kills you, whichever, either or. That's what a Chanak is. And mythology class had the creepiest looking, like it was a little adventure comic, and then it comes out with this horrifying little goblin, like little evil baby thing. Like it was like horror, like it was full on horror. Like there's no questioning how that was the most like horrific thing, even though it was like a little adventure. And that was like, I think one of my favorite things about Filipino folklore is that even when the folklore is fun and cute, there is like an aspect of it that is just straight up horror, like straight up absolute what do you call it, like trauma, I guess is what I'd say. Give me a sec. Please excuse me, I am save's coming. Yes. Okay.
Let's see.
The trauma that I experienced looking at that cannot be overstated. But yeah, like with the Chanak, for example, the monster baby, it was one of those things where it's just like,
Hate to be ungrateful here.
I don't know, like I don't know how to even like talk about it. It is just one of those things where you have like a creature that is like inherently horrific, and you just like, I don't know, like we have like a lot of fun. Like it is exciting to us to have something so horrific and yet so fantastic, I guess. And I think that like that mix between horror and fantasy like characterizes a lot of Filipino creatures. Also, I forgot to say, but this is my favorite boy, Asterius, as you all know. I hope you guys are enjoying.
A warm up for
By the way, if it seems like I'm scratching my nose quite a bit, I'm so sorry. That is true, I am scratching my nose quite a bit, and there's actually a reason for that. But I don't know what it is. Every time I'm speaking at length in English, for some reason my nose gets all itchy. I think it's so funny because like I speak English more than I speak Tagalog these days. And yet, speaking English makes my nose itchy because I'm being punished, I think, for not speaking the mother tongue. I think you guys have. Of course, okay, what else? I'm trying to think of like other things so like we can have chat participation. Right, okay. So, we are kind of going into the horror part. The way I'm saying it is so weird, isn't it? Horror. Horror? Yeah, I am allergic to speaking English, you're right. Which is so sad because I speak English every day. It's like my dust allergy.
Let's see
but
who's
I
better
just
at this,
I guess I'll
Zacharias.
die. No, so Right, horror. Filipino horror is interesting because it's always very effective. Like, there aren't many like famous, like internationally famous Filipino horrors. Except maybe like one or two. But I always found Filipino horror to be such a wonderful, like, interesting and just fun kind of like, how to describe it, like part of the culture, I believe. So, it is so fascinating to have Filipino horror because a lot of it is very familiar if you like, for example, Japanese horror. So, in Japanese horror, if you notice, there's a lot of like ghosts, there's a lot of very, I don't know how to describe it, it's very cultural. Like, it's very supernatural, because I think something that Japanese horror and Filipino horror have in common, I guess Asian horror in general. So when you look at Western horror, when you look at like American horror and like, you know, all that type, like not even European horror does this. It's actually just American horror. But I think there is this obsession with making it make sense in a kind of scientific way, rather than engaging with it on a spiritual level. Which, I mean, I think there's a lot of like Southern Gothic in the US that does it, and I think it has a lot to do with like, I guess, like spiritual and religious belief, which I totally like get. I understand that like there are a lot of like, there's kind of like this need to be enlightened or embody like skepticism or something like that, but I feel like it's almost like it strips the horror of its culture, if that makes sense. It's not my thing, I will say that. Like, when a lot of the horror is like, it has to be explained all the time, which I noticed, which is weird for me. It's like, I mean, why? Like, why do you need to explain it? Why do you need to like make it make sense? That's kind of the opposite of horror, isn't it? But that's just for me, I guess. It is just like, it's a personal thing, I guess, for me, which is that for me, as you notice with Hainai, horror, I love supernatural horror. I love horror that is like inexplicable, but like, I mean, there is like a portion of Hainai that unfortunately, like, that Mary has to explain a lot of stuff, and I do find that I'm becoming a little more guilty of the thing that I'm not a big like fan of. I guess like it is like a, what do you call it? It is a consequence of telling a story that you do want the audience to understand certain things. But at the same time, I am more inclined, like, the longer I think about like what I want to do for Hainai, the more inclined I am to kind of just have horror that doesn't need to be explained fully. And I think a lot of what I have Mary say, it makes sense to her. Like, so one of the things I love most about horror is when it makes sense emotionally and spiritually, but not logically. Or, I mean, it has an internal logic, right? But it doesn't have to, like, make sense to a skeptic, is how I would say. Like, it doesn't need to be scientific. It doesn't need to be exact. It doesn't need to be, like, oh, you have to, like, you don't need to be obsessed with, like, the details and things, you know what I mean? But I do like it to have an emotional sense, and I think, like, creators who have done this on an international level includes people like Guillermo del Toro, for example. Like, a lot of his stuff is horror, and a lot of his horror doesn't necessarily have to make sense. Except for, like, when Hollywood wants it to make sense, at which point it gets ruined. But I think Guillermo del Toro understands the concept of how horror, like, how spiritual horror and supernatural horror has an aspect of it that is purely, I guess, like, not necessarily metaphorical, but it's understood on a thematic and emotional level rather than a plainly logical, if that makes sense. I'm kind of getting into the little bit like dream logic, but not even dream logic. Like, because with dream logic, it's like things make sense. Things make sense because you in your mind feel like it makes sense. But I think, like, when it comes to, it's a little like dream logic. When it comes to supernatural horror, I like it when things make sense because of the current situation and current, like, emotional response. I think that's why I really enjoy that, even though, you know, it's still very much a trying to add logic to a supernatural thing. I like the idea of ghosts being like strong emotions that were left behind. Because I think that's like a really interesting concept, and I think that's like a very good way to make sense of ghosts and creatures like that. Okay. But yeah, it's like I'm like I've gone on a tangent again. Well, not really a tangent. I've kind of just gone with this idea. But what I do want to like add before we get onto the next portion of this talk is that with Hainai, and we will talk a little bit about Hainai. I know a lot of you might know this, but it was very much inspired by the Magnus Archives, and you know, like when I was in quarantine, me and Reg, my co-creator and my best friend, listened to the Magnus Archives together, and you know, on our own as well. And we kind of just listened to it over like Discord, and that was how we spent time. And I really enjoy the Magnus Archives, but the more we write our podcast, the more it's clear that we're not really like trying to be that. I mean, obviously we're not trying to be that, and I think like, you know, it kind of becomes clear as time goes on, because the Magnus Archives deals with like all types of fear, which I think is a really good like idea for a story, because you know, it allows you to kind of like delve into different types of horror. Like, not just like it delved into cosmic horror as much as it did like, you know, like supernatural horror, and there was even a lot of like, what do you call it? Like there was a lot of body horror. Like, I mean, Hainai has body horror too, so that's fun. But yeah, like it's so interesting how much Hainai has kind of like, it is its own thing. Like it even started as its own thing. And yeah, thank you so much, Capgrass for saying that. But I do think like even from the beginning, I think our sensibilities are very different with Hainai, because with Hainai, like from the beginning, it was something where I wanted to be very like close to my culture and everything. I think the biggest inspiration that I had from the Magnus Archives was like the format, but not necessarily. The simplicity of Magnus Archives is what really drew me to it, because it was amazing how they were able to kind of have this concept and do something that was like remarkably simple in terms of how they executed it. Like it was a series of tapes, and there was a society, like a type of like office or job that took on these tapes. So you get to like read out different, basically short stories. Whereas I like to say that like Hainai has kind of become the last season of Magnus Archives, which is just a linear story with a lot of cast and a lot of like soundscaping, which has made our lives a lot more difficult, and yet it is kind of where we wanted things to be. Like it's kind of where we wanted our storytelling to be. It is a way for us to the format of the phone call, even though we kind of like we use tapes as much as phone calls nowadays. The format of the phone call has been very interesting as a way to express the story, and as very amateur podcast creators, and I do mean very amateur, like we literally just started, it's like the reaction to the podcast has been very interesting. People have been saying like, it sounds very professional. It sounds like it was done by people who do this for a living. And quite frankly, like, we just figured it out on our own, and a lot of our equipment is very basic. A lot of our equipment isn't that good. It's all very cheap, and we don't know what we're doing. But at the same time, I think one of the big like inspirations we had from the Magnus Archives and from like other creatives is like I believe it was a Q&A at one point where they were talking about their earlier production, and they said, oh, we were just like doing it under a duvet. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, and that's basically what I do now. I like record my voice under a very heavy like blanket, a duvet, is as they call it, Duve. And we kind of do that, and then we put it through a kind of a filter, obviously. Like we put it through like a telephone filter and stuff like that. And I'm sure we will have a much better like method soon enough. But right now it is very much a very like roughshod,
Always a pleasure, Carol.
a roughshod like production. But it is very interesting, like humble beginnings, and yet if you have a good idea, people will listen to it. And I am a huge, like, I am so grateful for the listeners of Hainai, especially the two who are here in the chat right now. It is wonderful. Like, you guys really are the reason that it keeps going. I cannot stress enough how much you guys kind of like keep us going, keep us like creating, for sure. Okay.
See you, boy.
And okay, give me a sec. There is a need to pause. Okay. Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, we all start somewhere, right? Like, I think that the simplicity of the idea and the simplicity and yet like the success, I think, is very interesting. And there are like so many people who don't even know like about the concept and the and like the success of fiction podcasts. A lot of people think that podcasts are literally just like talking heads, you know, radio show type deals. And that is certainly the easiest one to do. I'm not saying that it is not like it is like I'm not saying that it isn't difficult to do, because it is like difficult. Especially to keep it going, especially with like the what do you call it? It is the like with especially with how many people are in the industry. But at the same time, it is actually quite like it is amazing to have this like there are much less how to describe it? Like there is not even competition. It's like the world of fiction podcasting is a lot smaller. And I think to the benefit of creators, I think, as well as like there's still so many, and it's very difficult to kind of like, you know, make your own identity. But at the same time, it has been so wonderful to kind of just have this like this wonderful community. Oops, I just lost. Oh well, I wasn't paying enough attention. But there's like this wonderful community of people who are so interested in these stories. I have only listened to a few, but I was able to meet some really cool podcasters during our storytelling podcast week. I think it's interesting because it reminds me a lot of my time in Filipino Comics. In Filipino Comics, when I started out, it was also rather like it was kind of like in the early-ish stages. Like I wasn't there for what you would call like the very like the really really early stages of comics. Like I wasn't there when it was just a bunch of people in a tiny like what do you call it, like in a tiny convention room in a mall. I mean, I was there. I went to buy comics from that, but I wasn't like selling comics. I wasn't creating comics at the time. But by the time I was selling comics, it was growing a little bit. We had a pretty big convention center. We had something called the Bayanihan convention, like Bayanihan Center, I believe it was called. And it was like just this convention hall, this convention space. And yeah, like it was growing, like we were beginning. And I remember being like one of the newer people who was doing comics about queer characters, comics about queer monsters, like having those two genres kind of mix, which was so interesting. And now it is huge. Like comics are so huge in the Philippines that we now have a website called PenLab. That is PNLAB. And PenLab like is this wonderful thing started by a man named Bernie Mercado. And he created the space where Filipino creators can put up comics. They can put up different, like, any indie creator. As long as they have the comics, and as long as they were willing to, like, put in the work to put the their logos, their titles, their names, and everything. You could put your independent comic up on PenLab. And that is amazing. Like, I have, like, the Filipino comics industry, although we have been affected by the pandemic for sure, we have had a hard time because of it. It is so strong. It has grown in such a way that is, like, so special. It is amazing how much it's grown. And I think, like, I'm getting a similar kind of vibe from podcasting. Although with podcasting, I'm still, like, like, obviously I'm not early. Like, I'm kind of here at the height of podcasting more than anything. So I'm not starting at the same place that I started when I started with comics. But with podcasting, it is really interesting because there's still a lot of, like, stories that haven't been told that have a huge audience. And I think that with Filipino stories especially, I think, like, that's such an interesting, not necessarily niche that we're filling, but, like, it is, like, this wonderful, like, space that we're able to, like, to live in. And it's not even just, like, Filipino, like, podcasting, because that's not even, like, the niche that we live in. It's kind of like, ours is almost like the Filipino immigrant fiction story, you know what I mean? Like the Filipino immigrant horror fiction story. It is interesting to, like, find a niche and live in it. And I think that's the niche we found ourselves in. Like, with Hainai. With Hainai, it's like, we have found a thing where I want to tell stories to people who aren't Filipino, but I want it to be for Filipinos, if that makes sense. Like, I think that one of my favorite things about, like, what Hainai allows me to do, and what I'm able to do as a storyteller, is, like, I have this Filipino character, and I have a very Filipino background, and I have all these things that I want to do and tell, and I want to share it with people who aren't Filipino. That's why I have, like, a main cast who is mostly not Filipino, and, like, you have a main character who is Filipino. It is such an interesting, like, dichotomy, because there are like there's so many, like, creators and creative works that are just for Filipinos, but I am not necessarily that. And I had even a discussion with my tatay, with my dad, the other day, or like a couple of weeks ago, I guess, or like a week ago, where we were talking about the difference between making content for Filipinos and making content for the sake of Filipinos, but not necessarily for Filipinos to consume. And I think I do that. Like, it's almost like if you were making a Netflix show, you know what I mean? When you're making a Netflix show, it is with the intent of appealing to an international audience, regardless of your cultural background. I think, like, for example, with Squid Game or something like that, like, you know that you're gonna be airing to an international audience, so you make, like, you do something where the context is very much, like, local. The context is something that is very cultural, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna do this to rep my country. And that's what I do with Hainai. Like, I do rep Hainai with a Filipino character, with Filipino folklore, with Filipino, like, cultural practices, like, and ideas like babaylan and everything. But I want people who aren't Filipino to listen and to, enjoy the story. And I think that's, like, with the listeners of Hainai being non-Filipino and still enjoying the story, I think that's, like, my goal, more or less, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's like, it is so interesting just to be like, the difference between making content for Filipinos and making content for Filipino, like, for both Filipinos and, like, international audiences. And, it's not necessarily, like, neither is better or worse, you know what I mean? But I think, like, it also, like, speaks to my lived experiences, because I did grow up with very American, like, TV shows and movies and everything. I think a lot of Filipinos do. But, like, I consumed a lot of those more than I consumed Filipino content. And nowadays, like, I try to be more, I try to make up for it. I try to do and consume more Filipino content. But in the end, I am very much a very Americanized Filipino. And quite frankly, like, and I am making content that I think would be enjoyed by a lot of people who, you know, who aren't Filipino. But it's like, it's almost like the way I do content is like, check out this cool like this cool stuff that I like that Filipinos make. Like it's more like, it's less like, oh, here is content that like I want Filipinos to like really, I do want Filipinos to love it, but it's like it's not necessary. Like Filipinos aren't my only audience in this particular scenario, if that makes sense. It is like something I want to do. Like it is something I want Filipinos to have
How about a different
something that we can talk about to non-Filipinos. And I know that's kind of like, oh man, why do you want to like cater to other people? I do, you know, like that's just how it is. Like that's why, like, why did I move to Canada? You know, why did I move to another country? It's like I am not gonna pretend. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like my Filipino pride like precludes me from wanting to present something that I'm proud of to non-Filipinos. I'm the kind of Filipino who wants to say like, oh, I love being Filipino. Check out all this really cool Filipino stuff that you can access as a non-Filipino. You know what I mean? So hopefully, like that's something I am able to communicate while I'm like, while I, how would I describe it? Like, hopefully that's something that isn't difficult for you guys to like enjoy, to understand as non-Filipinos. And yeah, like, I'm just like, yeah, like that. Okay. It is like, I am amazed by people who can like just chat and talk while like playing the game. Like I'm usually just completely silent when I'm doing a video game. So this is crazy. Like it is amazing how people can do it. I admire them completely. But yeah. Okay, so I have talked a little bit about my monster anthology. We talked a little bit about horror. I've talked a little bit about mythology. Well, not mythology. I'm a big fan of Tagalog mythology, is what I'm going to say. And I do like to remind people that Filipino mythology is a mix of many mythologies. And a lot of them are from different regions. And Filipinos have a regionality that I think a lot of people aren't aware of. And I do want to have... I'm so fascinated by context when it comes to stories by very specific like cultural stories. And I think the same should go for a lot of Filipino stories. Because the idea of a Filipino anything must identify or must acknowledge that a Filipino identity is not necessarily we are not one thing. We can say we're Filipino and be proud of that, but it's like saying we are human. It is like so many aspects of that are very different, and I think with Filipinos a similar thing has to be considered. Like the fact that there are so many types of Filipinos, there are so many different Filipinos, and that is just like a thing that you have to accept, a thing that when we are like considering the identity of Filipinos, we have to consider just the idea of I don't know, like
What else?
just the idea of being like part of a whole, but being a distinct part of the whole.
Hello, Meg.
I don't know if that makes sense. But I think like a lot of I am noticing this a lot, especially like interacting with a lot of people who did not grow up in the Philippines, who are Filipino, who have Filipino background, but who either didn't grow up in the Philippines or like feel very disconnected. I think that a lot of the things that a lot of frustration comes in about being Filipino, and that I think is fair. Like I think it's also fair that a lot of a lot of second generation immigrants feel very frustrated by the idea that a lot of like people who live in the Philippines don't legitimize their ethnicity, their identity. But at the same time, you have to understand that like there is a certain understanding of the identity that is like lost when you're not living there. And I'm sure I will be on that side eventually. because I won't be living in the Philippines for a long time, and I am getting permanent residence here in Canada, so it's gonna be a whole different thing. But at the same time, I think there's like this
I'm rich.
very distinct regionality for the identity of a Filipino, and I think that goes for even diaspora Filipinos who live in other countries, Filipinos, especially Filipino Americans. I want to talk about this just because it is a very hot button topic. I think there are a lot of modern Filipinos today who are very dismissive of Filipino Americans and like diaspora Filipinos. But honestly, like, it is a very interesting, like, it is hard for me to kind of to say that that is like unfair, because it is not, you know, like, there's a certain idea that people have, and it's hard for them to kind of let go of that idea. But it is the idea that, like, you are inherently living a better life when you're not living in the Philippines. And unfortunately for a lot of people, that is very true. The rate of OFWs in the Philippines is so high because the quality of life is it's not that high. I'm saying it's not that high. It is no secret that there's a lot of poverty in the Philippines. It is no secret that a lot of Filipinos leave the Philippines so that they can earn for their family. And it is no secret that a lot of it is also like for safety. There is a certain like, and it is also no secret that the reason for this is colonization. So it's just, you know, it is one of those things where it's difficult for a Filipino living in the Philippines to understand the experiences of Filipinos who live outside the country. And I really hope that like there's a bigger understanding of what that entails. I don't think you're making sense anymore. Give me a second. Okay. I gotta reset for a sec, because I think I'm rambling a little bit. My brain needs to needs to reset. But for those of you who are coming on to this stream a little late, or just newly joining us, I hope you are enjoying this show. Let me see. Okay. All right. So what did I chat about? We talked about I don't want to go back to Filipino horror. I think that would be super fun. So, one of the things I do want to talk about is Filipino horror. I think that is a super fun topic because with Filipino horror, the stuff I grew up with and the stuff that I like to engage in now is kind of different. It's kind of like there's a certain level of
I'm ready.
The popularity of Filipino horror when I grew up was more about ghosts. It was more about, like, you know, like, I went to a school. I went to Miriam College, which is a very old school, actually, in comparison to a lot of schools.
To make the most of it.
It was I believe it was a World War II hospital. I believe it was, so a lot of our stories, you know, talk about, like, how that affected us. As school, how that affected the school. And I think a lot of places have this kind of story. I think one of the very interesting unifying, like, traits of of horror and of, like, I think, like, a lot of people like to hear about school horror. And if you guys have any school horror you want to share, please feel free, because I think that'll be very fun. A lot of places have, like, really interesting, like, it's the idea of, like, things living in old places. I think the difference with Filipino horror versus other countries, I guess, or at least other areas, not all of them obviously, but like certain other countries, is that the school horror in the Philippines, and I find this to be so fun, like, I really find this to be interesting and terrifying, is that the school horror in the Philippines is also, like, Catholic horror. So, in the Philippines, mostly Catholic schools, right? Like, a lot of the private schools are Catholic schools. You can, like, figure out what that means politically. But, because of the large Catholic population in the Philippines, there is, like, almost this... How to describe it? Like, there's this tendency to mix together these two aspects of horror that are both very traumatizing when you really think about it. So, Catholic horror, you know, like, the idea of, like, horror, not just, like, enduring the horrors of Catholicism, which, you know, we all understand. But, like, with Catholic horror, it is the idea of, like, living in this place that is, like, it's so old. Like, so most churches are very old, right? Like, a lot of, like, this idea of, like, the age of a place and the trauma that took place in that area being, like, two catalysts for a horror story. And I think what I love about Catholic horror is that, like, what I love about, like, school horror in the Philippines is that it mixes both Catholic horror and, like, and ghost and school horror. Like, you have these two institutions that are old, and you mix them together, and you have this, like, you have similar, like, mindsets, like, you know, the bleeding eyes of Mother Mary, etc., etc. And I'm sure that a lot of people, especially, like, people from Mexico, because we have a very similar, like, similar setup in terms of, like, our culture, because we were also, like, we were colonized by Spain, and we were also, like, under the thumb of the U.S. I think we have, like, a very similar idea. We have very similar idea of how school horror and Catholic horror mixes together. I'm just assuming, though, but I'm assuming because of Guillermo del Toro, who said that, who said things where I'm like, oh wow, I understand you, Mr. Del Toro. Yeah, not really funny. Okay. Once again, let me know if you have any questions. Let me talk about anything, because I think it would be very fun. What is your favorite, Okay, here's the question that I want to ask. If you're Filipino, what is your favorite thing about the Philippines? And if you're not Filipino, what is your favorite thing that you've heard about that comes from the Philippines? You know, whether it be food, or something like a dance, or a cultural thing, or like a star, a Filipino, like, actor or movie star. Anything Filipino. Like, what is your favorite Filipino thing? Because I am actually quite curious. Like, what is your connection to the Philippines? Like, when you think Philippines, what do you think of first? That is what I'm very, curious about. Ooh, also, Desu Bells is in the chat. Hello. Thank you so much for waking up early for this stream. This very, very early stream in the Philippines, because right now in the Philippines it is, I believe, yeah, it is 8:20 in the morning in the Philippines, which, you know, thank you so much for coming in. It is very much appreciated.
Got a feeling it's Tiffany this time.
You will see that I'm gonna stop this run just because he's a bad one. Okay. So I'm gonna pause for a sec. We will... Let's listen to music while we chat a little more. Ooh, okay. So Cap says, a lot of the folklore I've seen is super interesting, so that's usually what the first thing that comes to mind. That's awesome. I'm very happy to hear that. The folklore is one of my favorite things for sure. But a lot of I found it interesting because, like, there is this tendency for Filipinos to want to be known and want to be acknowledged, and we're always surprised when we are because we were colonized by the US, which is the most known country in the world. Let's just say that, especially through media, social media, etc., etc. Like, there is, like, the Hollywood machine in the US is very strong. But for some reason, we have such a low representation. So we have such little representation in US media. Even though, clearly, they literally colonized us. So what's the deal, US? You know what I mean? And it is, like, the first thing to come to mind is how there are hardly any Filipino doctors and nurses in a lot of medical shows. even though Filipino doctors and nurses make up most of the medical community in the US, because literally there's a whole historical precedent for it, like especially Filipino nurses. But yeah, like, it's so interesting that happened. Like, it's so interesting how there's such little representation for a country that the US not only colonized, but a country that consistently consumes US media. So I think it's like really interesting to hear like how more people are hearing about the Philippines, especially folklore. I think like the folklore becoming more ubiquitous, becoming more known is wonderful, especially because how to describe it? Like, one, Filipino folklore is so unique, right? Like, there is something about Filipino folklore that is so unusual and very different from other countries. But I think also it's because of something called Pinoy baiting. I don't know if you've heard of it. So, for those of you who are unaware, Pinoy baiting is the concept of creating social media content, like videos, especially on YouTube, that cater to or feature Filipino content. And I mean, you know, it is what it is. Like, I enjoy Filipino videos by non-Filipino like creators. I love that shit. But it is like, because the Philippines is the social media capital of the world. We use the most social media by per capita, I guess. We have such a social media culture that you can get a huge number of people looking at your content when you have Filipino content. And I think, on one hand, it is very exploitative. It is so obvious when people are just doing it for the views, and we know, we can tell. But on the other hand, it does make it so that Filipino content is catered. Like, Filipino content is more like it's a metric for success, which has begun to bleed into TV shows and media, which I am very happy about. Like, that is something that I want to see more of. I want to see more media catered to Filipinos. I want to see more international media, especially American media, catered to Filipinos. And we got a little bit of that with Dressing. We get a little bit of that on YouTube whenever somebody makes a Jollibee video. And honestly, like, I think that's kind of interesting. I also, let me know if things are too loud. Actually, let me just quiet that down a little bit. Okay. I feel like doing a gaming stream while also trying to talk about things is a bad idea, because it does, like, mean that a lot of things get forgotten and or, like, just, like, put to the wayside. But I think it's still fun, like, just to have something on screen while we're talking. But anyway, let me see. Let's do this okay, so we are hitting the last 30 minutes of the stream, and I do want to talk a little bit more about Hainai and just like the way we created it and the way our thought process works with it. So, for those of you who don't know, Hainai is the podcast that I create that centers on a Filipina who lives in Toronto. She descends from a line of babaylan, or priestesses or shamans, and she helps save somebody from a supernatural event, and ends up helping solve some supernatural cases and mysteries. And the idea for this was that I wanted a main character who is that mystical POC, like mystical BIPOC, Black Indigenous POC character in a story, except she is the main character. And so far, I think the storytelling has been alright. Like, I'm hoping that things are, like, making sense. There are some things that I still want to include in the story, but I think overall, it is something that I think has resonated with a couple of people. and I think I just need to keep going because, you know, like, it is difficult to make a podcast of this scale on a regular basis, but it is still very fun. And a lot of horror elements. Like, it was surprising to me how scary the first episode was for a lot of people, apparently. But yeah, like, it's very interesting. Like, Filipinos do love horror. Like, you wouldn't think it, but like, there is like a whole culture around horror that Filipinos love, despite not having Halloween. That time of year is actually pretty creepy to a lot of people. So for those who don't know, and I think Mexicans also will know this very well, instead of celebrating Halloween, we celebrate something called Undas, which is basically like the act of honoring people during All Saints and All Souls Day. And a similar thing happens in Mexico called Dia de los Muertos. And I think Dia de los Muertos is more... I think it's more iconic, definitely more colorful. But it's a similar idea. So everyone kind of visits their dead during this time. So it's still, unlike Halloween, like, it's not like necessarily something about costumes and candy. But like Halloween, it is still a celebration. Like, it's meant to be solemn. But of course, when it comes to people of color, something that is meant to be serious ends up becoming a party anyway. And with Undas, and even with something called Holy Week, for those of you who aren't Catholic, but for those of you who are, you know what Holy Week is the week in which Jesus died, supposedly. So it is like reenacting how Jesus died. So even when things are like, even when we don't necessarily celebrate a spooky month, we celebrate it in a very spooky way. And I think that's very fun. I think that's a very fun thing to do. And I think, like, despite not being a Halloween country, I will say that, we enjoy the scary stories. I think, like, it's very much more an all year round type of scary rather than just Halloween. But, you know, as a Filipino who is here in Canada, I do love Halloween. So, you know, like, I love the excuse to kind of just be creepy the whole time. Although, for those who don't know, in the Philippines right now, the celebration that everyone has is Christmas. It's Christmas. It's been Christmas since September 1. Like, if you don't know, Christmas starts in September in the Philippines, and it hasn't stopped. Like, for me, I'm like, yes, it's Christmas, it's in September. And then, like, if people ask me, like, but don't you celebrate Halloween now? I'm like, yes, it's Christmas, then Halloween, then Christmas again. Like, that's just how it goes. Especially in the High Night podcast. I don't know if you guys saw this, but in whatchamacallit, in our Twitter, we made a post where we were like, Happy Halloween! It's Halloween! Then we had like asterisks beside the Halloween, it says Christmas. And it's like that gif of Jack Skellington, and the entire concept of The Nightmare Before Christmas is basically the Philippines. Like, we love Halloween, so Halloween's a cool holiday, but it's also Christmas. Like, it's just been Christmas this whole time. And we are gonna do that for Mary as well. Like, Mary is much of a Christmas nut as I am, as many Filipinos are. And we are gonna have like a bit of like that joke, that running gag, where Mary will celebrate Christmas in September, then she will celebrate Christmas again in December. Like, as you would. Okay. And, you know, it's the Catholicism, you know? Like, they force it upon us, and now we're just having fun with it. Like, if we can have a very early Christmas, why not, right? Okay.
Just what I need.
Oopsie. And, of course, if you guys have any questions, we are on our last 30 minutes. If you guys have any questions about just anything in general, anything Filipino, anything like we created, feel free to ask. For Silken Gloss is here, yay! Okay, Silken Gloss says, Halloween legit only lasts one day here, then the decor is pulled out immediately for Christmas. I mean, no, that's wrong. You're wrong, my friend. Because the Christmas decorations are already there, remember? I'm sorry, I made a mistake. ignore me. Ignore. I'm just doing like the usual, like dumb stuff I do on Hades. But yeah, like, listen, the decor is already there. Remember? Yeah, exactly. You remember? You know. Okay, I need to stop for a sec because my mouth is getting all. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Okay.
I'm ready.
So yeah, it's Christmas right now. I do have a Halloween costume I'm preparing, like you can see it here. I am sewing it up. I'm gonna be cutting it out, and Halloween's on Sunday, so I better finish it soon. But I'm very excited for sure. Let me just okay. Near the end of the stream, I will stop the game, probably, or at least I'll, like, pause the game. And then what I will do is I will, chat about anything you guys want to chat about. You can, like, ask me questions. You can just chill out with me, on the last bit of the stream. I know I was a little late, but I will try to end this stream, Silicon Gloss says, I haven't been in the mall in a long time, please understand. Yo, you're right. I'm so sorry. The Philippines is not, you know, like, it's still, like, COVID. That's all I'm gonna say about that. COVID does as COVID does, especially in a country like the Philippines, where, handling of COVID can be described as not. It just didn't happen. Especially with the leader that we have. Okay. But yeah, oh yeah, politics. That's what I promised in my stream. Politics. It's fine. It's very simple. Right now, we're suffering. That's it. Anyway, that's my politics. That's my talk about politics. Things are bad. Things are pretty consistently bad, but right now they're worse than usual. That's my political statement. Yeah. Thank you for listening to my politics talk. Okay. So for anybody who is watching this back, like, I am so sorry if this, like, feels like this has absolutely no, like, setup or, like, actual, like, structure, because it doesn't. I just want to chat about things that I'm very passionate about, and one of those things is, is Filipino horror, politics, and queerness. I will say, like, as a queer person, Filipino horror has been like like, it's wonderful to see the way Filipino horror has mixed with queerness. It's I don't know. So there are a couple of, like, really fun titles that I really like. One of them is called what was it called? Ang Jowa Kong Crosswise. So Ang Jowa Kong Crosswise, it means my lover, or my I guess boyfriend or girlfriend, but like my partner who is crosswise. And the reason it is called that, as you can probably guess, is that it is a wonderful and adorable, very gay story about a man who is dating a manananggal man. And that's why it's called Ang Jowa Kong Crosswise, because manananggal are cut crosswise. And another one who is doing God's work, and by God's work I mean, like, queer Filipino stuff, is an artist named Caldatier. I actually never pronounce their names. And they are, he is, a wonderful and amazing and absolutely iconic artist who is deaf. And the Filipino deaf community is a whole other thing, which I hope you guys, like, look into, because there's a wonderfully, like, colorful and vibrant community, deaf community, not just in the Philippines, like, in every country, but, you know, like, the Filipino deaf community is so interesting. And yeah, like, he just made a comic that called me out specifically. It was about, like, people who think that tikbalang are hot, and I do, yes, thank you. It was very funny. Yeah, so it's like the idea of, like, romance and queerness and Filipino monsters has been, you know, become very popular as time goes on, and I think that's really cool. Like, I think that it is very funny, but also really, like, it shows you, it kind of shows you how people feel. Like, I think it's very common for queer people to really identify with monsters. not just in the Philippines, but basically everywhere. Like, I do have a lot of friends who are queer and also monster lovers, and that is just something I find to be like very comforting, which is why I started the Filipino monster, the Filipino monster, and like the Philippine, sorry, wow, I can't even say my own, the Pinoy Monster boyfriend anthology. Wow, like I got so distracted I forgot the name of my own comic. But yeah, the Pinoy Monster boyfriend lover anthology, girlfriend lover anthology, is just like this fun way for me to express how queerness and monsters are, you know, two subjects that always align very easily. Sorry. Whew. Sorry about that. It's raining in this area, and I had to go out to buy something for an emergency, which is why the stream started late, and unfortunately, you are seeing the effects right now. Sorry. Please excuse me. Okay. Sorry for being disgusting on stream. Monster kissers and kinners. Yes, exactly. That is exactly right. We are all here, and we're here. We're queer, and we don't know how to drive. So, I do want to like say like the people have been asking like what's your plans for the next monster anthology, and I'm like, listen, I'm very excited. I haven't like confirmed anything yet, but I do want the next monster anthology to be NSFW. Like, all of the other monster anthologies are actually like all ages, because we wanted to like you know, we wanted to have like this fun thing that a lot of people of different ages can really enjoy. And I also wanted to be like this wonderful queer story, like people who aren't necessarily like adult, like people who are younger can actually enjoy as well. But that said, like the original inspiration, oops, how's my makeup? The original inspiration for the Pinoy Monster Boyfriend anthology was the Smut Peddlers monster monster boyfriend anthology. So going back to our roots, being doing something NSFW, it's something that we'll have fun with, I think. Like, and there are a lot of really amazing Filipino artists who just like make the most amazing like queer content, who would love to like take part in an anthology that covers like Filipino queer content. So, you know, like I think that we are very excited to just go into the next one. And yeah, if you haven't checked it out, please do check out the Pinoy Monster Boyfriend anthology, the Pinoy Monster Girlfriend anthology, and the Pinoy Monster Lover anthology. I think you guys will enjoy it, and I think it would be very cool if you just went to check it out. Anyway, okay. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you guys have anything else you want me to talk about before the end of the stream, please make sure to put that in the chat as well. Because I am, you know, like I'm just, I guess I'm just gonna finish off like this stream, and then I would love to like get your thoughts, get everyone's like any questions about like topics that I promised to talk about that I think I talked about, but I think like was very kind of messy, I guess. Like I am. Like the fact that I started the stream late because I had to do an emergency purchase and walk in the messy rain. That's what happened to me. How have you guys been? Also, I do want to say like this week has been, whoa. It is amazing that you people are actually here in the stream, because I did not announce anything, and I am so sorry to like have this be so out of the blue. So I am truly grateful that you guys are watching the stream. Like the fact that I have viewers on the stream boggles the mind. I will say that. It is absolutely mad that you guys are here. But well, that's all right. Roxy, oh my gosh. So Roxy's been working at the bakery. That is amazing, and I'm glad you are getting to watch the stream. I will definitely be posting the rest of this video, hopefully on the Hainai YouTube, just because this did stream on the Hainai Twitch. Even though it's not necessarily an official Hainai content thing, I think it would still be nice for people to get to see it. And of course, for those of you who want to join us for a much more structured and much more fun and much scarier stream, we will be streaming for Hainai, our Halloween stream. This is tomorrow evening at, I believe it is 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that is 9 a.m. Philippine time for October 31. So we are doing October 30 here in Eastern Standard, but October 31 for people in the Philippines. So yeah, like if you want to join that, it'll be here also on HainaiPod, twitch.tv/HainaiPod, and we will be the decision that we have made for the game we will play is one that I think I will regret. But Fetus, you have to wake up early. I'm sorry. No, you don't have to. It's fine if you don't. But if you want to wake up early, you can. Yeah, it'll be a horror stream. I'm gonna regret it again because I'm like, it's in the evening again, and I will not be able to do anything. But we'll try. We'll try. The game we ended up choosing, although this still can change depending on people's votes and things and ideas, is Outlast Whistleblower, which last time we tried to do Outlast, I got scared at the Pure Darkness portion and gave up. But Outlast Whistleblower, as far as I can remember, does not have a Pure Darkness portion. If I'm wrong, then I am I'm not in a good way, but yeah, like I think we can get a little farther with that, hopefully. But yeah, I'm very happy you guys joined me for this one. We are at 15 minutes before the end of the stream. Guess what I'm doing tonight? I am gonna watch the premiere, the movie, like the in-theater premiere of the new My Hero movie, My Hero Academia. So I'm excited about that. Anyway, Fatum Batula, which is like a small walking simulator. Ooh. That is a very interesting suggestion, Roxy. I will look this up and we will see if we can play it as well. Oh man. Alright, we'll see. We'll see if we can do that. There are a couple of other horror games that I've seen, but I am too scared to play them. There is one... What was it called? There is one about a person who's biking. I saw it a couple of weeks ago and it was terrifying. And I don't want to play it, but it is possible. And yeah, like there are other ones as well, like that will be very interesting to cover. Oh, also there is another idea we had, but I don't know if you guys want to cover it. So one of the things you want to do is tell some scary stories. We were deciding either we were gonna cover some maybe ideas for future Hainai episodes, or like certain stories that will be related to Hainai. Like a short story that I can come up, like that I'm coming up with for certain aspects of Hainai. Or, and this will be very fun for the Filipinos in the chat, we will dig up the what was it called? Philippine ghost stories. No, what's it called? True Philippine ghost stories. So, for those who aren't aware, and this is another aspect of Filipino culture that you guys need to understand that is from our from our generation. So, there are these super cheap books called True Philippine Ghost Stories. And they were these collection of... they were cheap, but quite frankly, but everyone kept just opening the packages and reading them in the bookstore because they were so popular. They were collections of Philippine ghost stories from different places. A lot of them covered school ghost stories and stuff like that, because there are a lot of really popular ghost stories in the Philippines. And basically they ran for a long time. It was the top tier scare for a grade schooler in the Philippines. I'll just say that. So I don't know if they hold up. I think some of them really do hold up, honestly. But we'll try to I know that some of you have them. So if you have them, give them over. Oh god, they went past 100 issues. That's not surprising. But yeah, and they have these scary covers as well. And there are like a couple of really interesting, like, how to describe it, like, there are a lot of really interesting, like, there's actually a YouTube channel. I will also like include them in the document and or resource of things that I've talked about in this stream today. But there's a YouTube channel that talks that tells like scary stories in Filipino that I think I will post as well. So yeah, we are coming up to the last portion of the stream. Let me quit this real quick. So what I'm gonna do is quiet this down a little bit so that we don't have to. And then I will do this thing. Ooh, let's see if this works. Let me try this, okay? Who's that? Oh my god, who is that? Let's see. Hi everybody, I am now full size. Let's see if I can turn off the stream. Yeah, I can. Okay, well that works out. I'll turn off the Hades game stream. Hi everyone! It's me, Motzi. So yeah, that was a very messy stream, but I hope you guys had fun. We are coming to the end, but we have not ended it yet. So in this last bit, you guys can talk about anything you want. You can ask me to talk about anything you want. And I will show you guys a couple things that I'm planning for Halloween, because even though we don't celebrate Halloween in the Philippines, we do love our creepy things, and we do love just partying. Any excuse to party, obviously. So let's see. First of all, I want to show you guys something really cool, which is what's on November 1 decibels? But yeah, there are a couple things that I was doing for Halloween, one of which is this really lovely Halloween gift exchange. Oh, All Souls Day. Yes, that's true. So All Souls Day is on November 1. All Saints Day, I believe, is October 31. Or is it November 2? I forget. But yeah, like, for some people, they would want to return to the province, although I don't know if that's viable right now with COVID still raging and quarantine still happening and everything. Yes, and Roxy, I did mention it before, like when I don't think you were here, right? You were here when we mentioned it, but like in other countries where we don't celebrate Halloween, we do celebrate, like, yeah, All Saints and All Souls Day. Dia de los Muertos is definitely the most famous for sure, and the coolest, honestly, like the most interesting, like visually. But in the Philippines, we have something called undas, which is visiting like the graves of families and, you know, having big meals, having like this wonderful. It's a less lively, I guess, version of Dia de los Muertos, but it's still like there are still like parties. There's still a lot of like evening eating and like a lot of like really cool things that they sell. I wrote an article about this. Yeah. But sadly, because of COVID right now, cemeteries are closed. That's so sad. That's so sad. But yeah, I think it's still really cool. Like in the Philippines, we have like there are, you know, street vendors who sell street food near the churches. So we go to church and then we go to visit the graves of our families, you know, clean it up, everything. We don't necessarily have like colorful iconography for ours. Very true, Roxy, very true. We all love to party. We all come from the same place, quite frankly. We were an indigenous people colonized by Spain and then eventually like taken over by the US. We are Filipinos and Mexicans be like. Filipinos and Mexicans just like shaking hands. Make wax balls? Huh. Yes. Just I was thinking, is that like a tradition? No, it's just like what you do when you have a lot of candles. Yeah, like so where I would visit, which is Batangas, which is it's a little bit north of was it north or south? But yeah, it's like it's near to the area where I lived in Metro Manila. And we would go visit my dad's family because my mom's family is all the way down south. So it was very difficult to it's South Manila, okay. So it was very difficult to get to where my mom used to live. But with my dad, it was like a 2 hour drive out of the city. So we would visit there, and we would just have some fun. Like, one of my favorite things to do is burn things, as with any child who is a pyromane. No, there was like we would like go to the grave. It was mostly just the adults talking, which is why we found it a little bit boring. But it was fun to kind of like come together, have a lot of amazing food, and then light a lot of candles. I remember we'd have like a sort of a almost like a like a very solemn parade, because the way it was that the cemetery was like down this really high slope. We'd go down this really high slope, and then we'd like get to the end, and that was where the cemetery was. That was very interesting. And one of our favorite stories that we came up with, oh, that's so true, decibels. The older you get, the more family drama you find out when the adult starts considering you an adult. There's so much adult drama like I am missing out on by not being in the Philippines, but when I was like about to leave, I was getting a lot of adult drama because oh my god. But yeah, like it's very interesting, it's just very fun. Like there are obviously like different practices and different foods for different areas, but it's still very similar. You visit the dead, you honor them. There's a very Catholic tinge to it. You go to church and everything, but everyone loved the food, good food. And also like it was one of the most common like reasons for people to go out of Metro Manila, because a lot of people who live there obviously have family outside of the city, so that was really interesting. And yeah, like that's how people in the Philippines celebrate Undas, or All Saints All Souls Day. Although, because we are very Americanized, and even if we weren't, I think it's still like, being that it is a creepy season to visit the dead, we had a lot of like Halloween-esque specials on TV. And okay, so Filipinos in the chat, if you remember this, what was it called? I think it was called Rated K or something. Like it was Katakutan, I think it was called, or something. So there was a TV show that would air a Halloween special. I call it a Halloween special. It's technically an Undas special, but yeah, it's basically like a special on the night of October 31 and November 1 and 2, where they would just tell scary stories. And I think there are a couple of, Gabi ng Lagim. Oh, that's true. It might be that too. But yeah, like different channels would have a special of scary stories that the very professional like newscasters would like get their like creepy voices on. They'd be like, they're like, there's like I'm trying to remember what her name is. Like there's this lady I remember very specifically who had a very like who was so gleeful at being able to tell a scary story. It's like how do I describe it? It's like she would say something like, oh, well, like when you find yourself alone at night, like in Filipino obviously, so it's like pag mag-isa ka sa ilalim ng buwan, wag ka. Like, she'll just be really, it's just really fun like to hear this very professional lady kind of just talk about scary stories. And I think there's a special that is actually on YouTube about the scariest places or the most haunted places in the Philippines. I love it when people like are able to record these things and put them on YouTube, because it shows just how obsessed Filipinos are with scary stories, and it's really fun. And a lot of Filipino scary stories and urban legends that I grew up as a kid get kind of adapted into Hainai, and a lot of it, like some of it's original, like I mean a lot of it's original that I write in, but a lot of it's also like inspired by stories that I've heard. One of the most obvious, I think, or one of the most iconic ones that I included in Hainai is the episode where Mary talks about her father, her tatay. That was Nakaraan. And Nakaraan has a story in which her tatay gets into a jeep in the 80s, and the jeepney driver is acting very creepy and weird. But then he finds out that there's a reason the jeepney driver was acting that way. And it is a very popular urban legend. But when I tried to look for it online, it was actually quite difficult to find it online, honestly. It was so interesting. Like, I did find a little bit about it, but it is one of those things where you realize how ubiquitous it is to you, but then once you're like far away and you're trying to look for sources, it's very difficult to track anything. So yeah, it's just really interesting. A lot of it's oral tradition. You know what I mean? Like I think one of the reasons it's hard to kind of track what about Filipino culture is Filipino culture is because a lot of it is oral tradition, and a lot of the oral tradition is like obviously it's oral. It's not written down. So I think that's why Hainai works so well for Filipinos as much as like people who aren't Filipino. It's because like it reminds my family of the radio. So they loved radio shows back in the 60s and 70s. Like they was those most popular things. Like they were dramas and there were action radio shows, but there were also horror radio shows. And my parents loved those. And they were so enthusiastic about Hainai being something similar to that. It's literally the resurrection of the radio show, I think is what it is. So it is just so interesting to kind of like be that again with Hainai, be that for other things. But yeah, so we are hitting like near the end of the stream. Please make sure to ask your questions before we end this stream because I'll end it a little late as I started a little late, but at the same time I am gonna be ending it just on time because I do need to leave for the event of the evening, which I am ready for. I will show you guys something very fun. For those of you who know, I am gonna be very well dressed for this occasion because it's my boy. Sorry, it's my boy, Wing Hero Hawks. That's gonna be fun. Anyway, I will say, let me see if I can show you guys this before the stream ends. Thank you so much for joining me. Filipinos and non-Filipinos alike. That is kind of what I want to show here. It's like I want to be able to have this kind of audience, this mixed audience where I can explain the context and the ideas and certain things where it's like very Filipino, but at the same time I want to share this idea with other people. Because that's kind of what I do now. I am a creative in Canada. I am sharing a lot of cultural touchstones that I grew up with that a lot of people might not have context for, and I try to make it. I try to make it in such a way that it is something that can be enjoyed by people who didn't necessarily grow up with it. And I hope that that is what's happening with Hainai. I hope that's what's happening with other content like the Pinoy Monster anthology. And I think that is also a way for a lot of Filipino Americans and Filipinos in the diaspora to connect with their roots, because you will feel a lot like an alien. I think like it'll, or at least like it'll feel very disconnected. You won't have that context, but at the same time that you do have a context and you do have this interest and love for this thing that you didn't grow up with. I think that goes for both non-Filipinos and Filipinos who did not get to grow up with a lot of these cultural touchstones. And yeah, it's interesting just to have that be part of what you consume in media in the modern day. I think that's like something amazing about something amazing about technology. It's something amazing about the internet. It's just like people who aren't Filipino are seeing all these Filipino things. I think that's amazing. I think that's fantastic. And I hope that that's something that continues. Every time there's like this Filipino title that gets attention, obviously I'm like, oh man, I wish that was me. But at the same time, I'm like, oh man, that's amazing. I'm so happy. I am so happy to see Filipino stories become so known and loved. And I think it's just really cool. And yeah, I am really happy that you guys joined me for this stream. I will end the stream now, but thank you so much for joining me. Everybody who dropped in, everybody who took part, who asked questions. I know it was a little messy, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can either reach out to the Hainai podcast, so that's at Hainai Pod, HINAYPOD. It's on Twitch, it's on Twitter, it's on Instagram, on Tumblr, on Facebook, and also on YouTube. And if you want to reach out to me personally, I am Motzie Dapul, so it's Motzie and Dapul. Motzie Dapul. You will find, if you search my name, you can find me anywhere. But on Twitter, I am at MotZied, Motzied. And on Facebook, I'm also there. My writing page is there. I am on Tumblr at motzie.dapul.tumblr.com. And yeah, just you can get in touch with me, ask questions about the topics. Like if I didn't cover a topic enough, for sure you can ask more about it. I will be putting together the resources as soon as I can. I will be talking about, like, obviously we didn't really chat in depth about a lot of things, but I will also like talk about the stuff that I've done, Hainai, and of course like the Pinoy Monster anthologies, and comics in general. I can, if you want to hear more about different titles, different things that you want to look at, you want to look at Filipino comics, you want to look at Filipino creations. I am right now wearing a Filipino textile. What do you call it? Like a, I guess, shrug on, or whatever you want to call it. By Balikbatik, which is a company that works with indigenous craftspeople to create unique pieces and make sure that they get paid well, because that is another issue. Like, as with most countries, indigenous rights are a big issue. But yeah, like there's so much about the Philippines I want to share with the world, and I think that's why I want to take part in this stream, even though it was kind of out of the blue. So thank you so much. I would like to say goodbye with our friend the Barrel Man. I think I might get banned on Twitch if I actually take this barrel off. What do you guys think? I think it's not gonna happen. I think that we can do this. Here's his backside, because what happens is that he brings something else to the table that I'm not gonna show here, because I think Twitch is very very invested in what might happen. But yes, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for watching the stream. I hope it wasn't too difficult to hear me. I hope there weren't too many issues. And I will see you all at the Halloween stream for High Night Pod. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you again, and have a good night. Happy Halloween. If you are interested in Filipino content, please get in touch. I love talking about Filipino content. I will not stop talking about it. Thank you. Good night, and mabuhay, as which is the greeting and the goodbye. Salamat. Good evening. Have a good night. Ingat. Ingat means be careful, but it also means goodbye. So ingat.